The film opened in Alaska. A man named Winston was in an isolated cabin, just before FBI agents burst in to arrest him. He was met by Deputy Marshal Madeline Harris, as Winston had been dealing with a crime boss named Moretti. In an effort to save his skin, Winston offered to testify against Moretti in exchange for full immunity. Madeline reluctantly agreed. Madeline escorted Winston as they were set to fly to Seattle for the testimony. They boarded a plane and were met by their pilot, Darrell Booth. He took off, and Madeline noticed a scratch on the back of his head, but Booth brushed it off as an occupational hazard. Winston then looked down at the floor and saw documents and photos belonging to the real Darrell Booth. He tried to get Madeline's attention to warn her, but she thought he was trying to get himself free. The pilot turned around to give Winston a sickness bag, and Madeline noticed what appeared to be a bloody wound on his arm. She then asked him how he knew they were going to Seattle when she hadn't mentioned it. Sensing that she was starting to catch on, the pilot revealed himself to be a hitman sent by Moretti to kill Winston by leaving him and Madeline somewhere for the wildlife to get them. Madeline fought the hitman and got knocked unconscious. Winston talked to the hitman about his dealings with Moretti. Just as Madeline started to wake up, she got a taser out and got it ready for when the hitman came back. And she zapped him unconscious before tying him up. The hitman regained consciousness and started attacking Madeline, and the plane was going down, but Madeline managed to take control of it just before they ended up crashing to the ground. Winston found out that the hitman had gotten information on him and his mother to threaten him into cooperating. She tried to contact help and got in touch with fellow Deputy Caroline Van Zant to alert her that the trip had been compromised and that there might be a leak in the department working with Moretti. Caroline investigated while Madeline also ended up in touch with another pilot, Hassan, who guided her through the skies on the way to land in Anchorage. Madeline later learned that the real Darrell Booth had been gruesomely murdered. The hitman regained consciousness and began to taunt Madeline about an incident from her past. He mentioned that someone in her care had been burned alive and left to die. Madeline beat the hitman back into unconsciousness and was made by Winston to explain herself. Madeline explained that she had been made to look after a woman in Mexico named Maria, whose boyfriend had business with the cartels. Maria had asked to take a bath unsupervised, and Madeline had obliged her despite that being against protocol. A sicario had ended up throwing a Molotov cocktail through the window, and since Maria had been handcuffed to the bathtub, she had been unable to flee, and Madeline had been unable to save her. She had been demoted to a desk job, and she had been haunted by her mistake ever since. Caroline got back in touch with Madeline and said she had a team waiting in Anchorage to help her. Madeline started to get suspicious that Caroline might be the leak. She got in touch with Deputy Director Coleridge to alert him of the situation and to try and catch up to Caroline. After encountering a shipwreck on the coastline, Madeline and Winston were able to give Hassan a clue as to their location. This helped his radar pick them up and make it easier to guide them. The plane started heading toward a mountain. Madeline just barely managed to avoid hitting it but crashed through a huge pile of snow. As she flew upward, the hitman's knife slid down and into his grasp. He started to cut himself loose and undid his cuffs after stealing Madeline's shades. The hitman freed himself and stabbed Winston twice before attempting to strangle Madeline. Winston pulled the knife out and cut the belt the hitman was using, and Madeline incapacitated him by hitting him with a flare to the chest and then knocking him out with a fire extinguisher. Madeline applied first aid to Winston, but he was losing a lot of blood and was starting to fade out. She contacted Hassan to try and find a faster way to get to Anchorage, and he tried to help her even though it might mean they would lose fuel faster, but she vowed not to let Winston die. Winston started to apologize for the crimes he had committed. This caused her to remember overhearing where Winston had said he was sending money, as that was the same location Coleridge said he was coming from. This made her realize Coleridge had been the leak all along. She contacted Caroline to admit her mistake to her and to warn her that Coleridge was coming for her. Madeline started flying closer towards the landing strip. She tried to contact Caroline again, only to be answered by Coleridge, who informed Madeline that Caroline had gotten into a fatal car accident, presumably hit by one of Moretti's goons. Madeline blew up on Coleridge and said she knew he was the leak and that she would expose him. 2 carrier jets flew next to the plane to make sure they didn't endanger civilians by potentially crashing. Madeline got in touch with Hassan again, but the hitman tried to attack again, and Madeline shot him twice. Hassan frantically tried to guide Madeline as she started to lose fuel, and Winston started to lose consciousness. Police and paramedics waited on the scene as Madeline made a rough landing. The plane door opened, and the hitman was ejected from the plane, landing on the strip where he was plowed by a truck. The plane came to a halt, and Winston woke up. The medics arrived for Winston. Madeline met Hassan face to face for a moment until she spotted another one of Moretti's goons going into the ambulance with Winston. Madeline ran over in time to witness the assassin trying to suffocate Winston until she shot him dead. She grabbed the assassin's phone to directly speak to Coleridge and assure him that he was going down. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more amazing movie breakdowns, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, see you in the next video.